Welcome to Critical Aspects of Law Enforcement, a podcast where we dive into the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being of the law enforcement officer.
Minor injury accident in the 2700 block of 156th Avenue Northeast.
All right, welcome back to Critical Aspects of Law Enforcement. I'm your host, Vernon Phillips, and today on the show we've got John Blumenthal, or otherwise known as Blue. And I've had the pleasure to know Blue for the last couple of years, and he's doing lots of great things. And we're going to have a conversation with him today, and we're going to get a little bit of his background and what he's doing now. So, Blue, I'm going to turn it over to you. Just kind of give us an idea of who you are, your background, and we'll go from there.
Sure, Vern. First of all, thanks for reaching out. I really appreciate it. And I think it's been a couple of years ago. I think we met at a conference in Florida, actually.
Yep.
Yeah. So, yeah, some great things are happening. I was raised right here in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. My dad was a police officer for, I think almost 30 years here in Oklahoma City. He was involved with the Oklahoma City bombing back in 95. Mom and dad got divorced. I was like 8 or 9 years old, which was obviously not uncommon for cops' families, unfortunately. Got a brother who's he's still in the police department. After high school, I joined the United States Marine Corps. Went 4 years active duty there, and then moved back to Oklahoma City and got on the police department in August of '99.
All right. So obviously there's a lot of there that we could dive into, your service in the Marines. We could jump into, your career there with Oklahoma City. But, kind of before we really dive into that, obviously we know that law enforcement is a demanding job. We know that even, obviously the military service is a demanding job. But what is it that, you did regularly or that you currently still do to just take care of your overall health, not just, your physical health, but your whole person, right? Your physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being.
Yeah. What I'll say, first of all, is it has not always been like this. My first critical incident was August 31st, 2000. I had 2 partners killed in front of me. I'd been on like 3 months off FTO. So lots of trauma, lots of critical incidents, and a lot of a few marriages. And also with that, though, was not taking care of myself. So I do want to let you know up front that this has not always been this way. And I am still working towards whatever it looks like to be as healthy as I can, both emotionally and physically. 2014, 2015, I think was kind of my breaking point-ish. I was on a call. It was after we'd had a massive tornado come through in 2013. And killed several children, and I was our team was a huge part of that. I was on the urban search and rescue team through the Oklahoma City Police Department at the time, and had some pretty substantial events happen during that tornado. And actually a chaplain friend of mine just came up to me. He saw me on a call, and he was like, "Blue, what's going on with you?" And I was like, "I don't know, nothing. I'm fine. Like everything's good to go, man." And he's like, "I don't think it is." And I'd known this guy my whole career. I knew him before I came on because of my dad. And he was like, "You need to go talk to a counselor." And I was like, "I'm not talking to a counselor. I've tried that. I've made some counselors cry. Like, that's not for me. I'm a pretty hardcore guy. Yeah, I'm fine." The typical speech. I became happy being unhappy. And it was just kind of my thing it was kind of my identity then was the guy who was at this event or the guy who was at that event. And at the time, I think I had 3 or 4 Medal of Valors, some life-saving awards and some other stuff. And I just thought I was pretty good to go. I just got to a breaking point, though. I got to a point where nobody wanted to be around me. My kids didn't want to talk to me. My wife pretty much hated me. And it just got to a breaking point. I finally, just to literally check a box, I found a counselor in Norman, Oklahoma, which is just south of the metro here where I live in Oklahoma City. He was a retired cop, and I was like, I'll go talk to this guy just to check a box, literally to go tell people I did it again. The first, 5 minutes or so, he was like, we kind of start talking, and I was like, this is not for me. And he's like, "Of course it's not, blah, blah, blah." And he goes, "You're pretty effed up." And he said it. And I was like, holy crap. And I just started crying. Like, I lost it right there. I literally broke down. I let the armor go. I let everything go. And I think that was in 2014, 15, maybe. I let it go. I started doing EMDR, which I actually attribute that and my counselor to saving my life. I still go to him. I went to him last month, I think. I still do checkups. But his just the way he talked to me, the way he treated me, probably definitely saved my life. Um, I try to catch up to, like, that's obviously the mental part of it. I still go to counseling. Obviously, I have a very, very strong support network, not only here but around the country, but obviously with my family too. That's a huge piece is my family. We always say family first, and you know that you're still active and still out there, and we say family first, but we're the first ones to pick up the phone and go to a call out. We're the first ones to go
Yeah.
take another call or whatever. But yeah, I try to train. I do jujitsu and judo and boxing 3 or 4 days a week. I still try to work out with all three of my adult children are police officers here in Oklahoma. So I still try to work out with them as much as I can. Um, I retired a year and a half ago. And I really I thought I was taking care of myself, but I still slip. I still get emotional. I'm, people think when you retire, the trauma stops, and it doesn't. I still have nightmares every now and then. It's not like it used to be, but it goes with you. So that emotional piece, that mental piece is super huge to stay on track with, as well as your physical.
Yeah. And I appreciate you sharing all that. I mean, and, and that kind of ties into some of the other stuff we're going to talk about, moving forward. But just making sure that you're actually, investing in yourself and taking care of yourself. It doesn't mean that it's going to be constantly all the time, right? Because, just like you, I mean, you try to do the best you can, making sure that you're, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually squared away. But, there's times where, sometimes it slips, right? And sometimes there's a gap in there. And then, but, trying to maintain some type of level of consistency, is what makes a difference. But when you get to a place where, you kind of are like done and you're like checking all that away and you're like, I'm not going to do anything physical anymore. I'm not going to engage myself, mentally or emotionally and spiritually. I can just kind of check out of all those areas. You know, that's a red flag. And that's the time where, people around you need to be stepping in, or you need to be, kind of seeing those red flags firsthand. And making use of resources. I mean, the resources we have now are so much better than they were. There's still a little bit of that apprehension of making use of those resources and actually going out and, like you said, sitting down with a therapist. But when you can get in contact with somebody who's culturally competent and understands the profession, that makes a difference. Because, like you said, I mean, you've made counselors cry,
Mm-hmm.
and so when you leave there, how does that make you feel? You're like, man, I went to them for help, and now they need to go they need to go talk to somebody, right?
Yeah,
What is
I
that?
tell people I give counselors.
Yeah,
And I've heard that from so many people. I went and did what you said, and it's not working. And I'm like, well, it's like I've heard people, compared to running shoes, you don't always get the right shoes on. You don't quit running. You don't quit working
yeah,
out or whatever it is. You don't quit wearing clothes because they don't fit right. So, I try to tell them, I'm like, let's find another one. Like, there's so many out there that want to help and so many good ones out there. You just got to find the right fit. And it took me a while to find the right fit, because not all of them do it for the right reason, I guess would be a good way to say it. But some of them just don't get the training. And the more I talk to, um, they get this extra training, they go on ride alongs. They're constantly trying to learn our culture, which is not easy. It's not easy to learn this. We've been going through it a long time. I did 24 and a half years before I retired. And, to try to tell somebody what's going on out there, or try to explain even a feeling or emotion that you have, it's almost impossible. I was
yeah,
talking to a group the other night here in Oklahoma City, and I said the emotions I had back then, I couldn't even explain them because I'd never had them before. I felt hurt and I felt anger and I felt pain and I felt alone and disconnected all at the same time. I had no clue. I had no training. The Marine Corps certainly didn't train you in that. The police department didn't train you in that. And so I didn't even know what I was feeling. I wasn't going to be able to tell anybody else how I felt because I didn't even know. It was just a weird feeling I would have.
Yeah. And, but the more you invest in that, the more that you've kind of dived into that whole idea of taking care of yourself and your overall well-being. I mean, you learn more about that, right? You learn, what your triggers are and what things to kind of do and not do. And I think that's one of the biggest things is trying to, educate and like say, hey, you know, it's all right to need help, right? It's all right to make use of resources. It's all right to learn who you are as an individual, how you respond to, different incidents, traumatic events, so that then you could better, recover after the event. And when you do that, just puts you in a better place, gives you more adaptability and just kind of helps you, have a successful career. Because how many times have we seen, individuals where they either get out of their career early or they retire and then, a year later they're dead, right?
Yep. Well, that's kind of what happened to my dad. My dad did, gosh, almost 30 years here. He retired at 50 in '03, and then at 53 in '06, he was dead. And was he sick? He obviously was somehow sick. He didn't tell anybody, of course, because he didn't talk about it. But at 53 years old, after making it almost 30 years in the police department and some pretty traumatic events, just died. Couldn't even really tell you. I think sometimes it was from a broken heart, if you want me to be honest, because I think his identity when he retired was completely stripped. He continued to work extra jobs because I had a little company then. He was working with me at extra jobs. Literally, he was in the hospital about 10 days. So up until then, he was working every day. And looking back, I was like, golly, had the knowledge I had now, had he listened, I don't know. I wasn't listening, you know.
Yeah.
And I don't want to call it generational because I don't think that's fair to those that didn't have any resources before us.
Yeah.
But like you said, we have that now. And I often challenge people, the ball's in your court now kind of thing. The resources are here. Most of us who have been through whatever event, we've had that emotion. It might not be the exact same event you've been through, but we've had that emotion tied to a traumatic event. And I think that's where people like us come into play when we're reaching out to people going, hey, look, I've been down a road and it hasn't been positive for me, but this is how I kind of got on the other side of that. And when we start talking one-on-one at ground level, grunt in the trenches to troops, most of them listen now because it comes from people like us. It comes from people who have had to go to counseling. We've had to have spiritual training. We've had to sit down and kind of reevaluate ourselves and go, you know what, maybe I'm the problem. Maybe it's not everybody around me. And that's hard to do. It's very, very hard to do.
Yep. And I think that's one of the biggest things is getting people to understand that it really begins with you as the individual, right? I mean, people can tell you whatever they want and you could learn as many things as you want, but until you decide as an individual that, okay, I'm going to do right by me, that I'm actually going to, take responsibility for where I'm at and then actually start to make those steps, to really change the things that are going on in my life. And, because a lot of people want somebody to come in and do it for them, but it doesn't work that way.
Yeah. What's crazy about people like us, we don't like to show weakness. We don't want to show weakness to our partners, our command, our supervisors, and more importantly, to our family. So if I was to come home every day and cry, I felt like my family would think I was weak and I couldn't provide for them. Maybe I couldn't do my job because I was crying all the time and I was weak. And I tell these officers, these first responders, hey, there's a time to be in work mode and a time to be selfish. And that's the part we struggle in sometimes is to be selfish. We don't have time to work out. I've got to sleep. I've got to work extra jobs. I got to do extra details. I get all that. But if you don't take care of yourself now, you're going to really be struggling when I'm almost 50 years old. You're really going to be struggling as your body starts to catch up with the times and how you're trying to treat it and how you've treated it the last 25 years and not taking care of it. It's hard to play catch up there, but nobody likes to look weak. And that's some of the issue when I go talk to first responders. They don't want to look bad in front of their coworkers, their partners. They don't want to look bad at home, and it sucks because it's not easy to do. You got to be in work mode. I'm not telling them to go cry in the middle of a call, but know on the other side who to call when you're having a breakdown, when you are sitting behind a building crying by yourself and don't know why. Your body's going to give you signs, and you really got to pay attention to them sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And, as we move forward, and you kind of already touched on it a little bit, but, when you look back at your career, and you think about, the different things that you've been involved in and you've experienced, is there one in particular that you can say, man, this was probably one of, the worst things that I actually had to deal with? And then how did you get on the other side of that? Because, I think that's a key point that we really need to try to instill is like, hey, look, you might have, said critical incident and it might be really, really bad, but you can still get on the other side of it.
Yeah, I would say, my career started off August 31st, 2000, when two of my partners were killed in front of me. Officer Jeff Rominger from Oklahoma City and Trooper Matt Evans from the Oklahoma Highway Patrol. We were in a pursuit the wrong way on I-40 downtown Oklahoma City, and major crash, and they were killed. I'd been around death because of the Marine Corps, but I wasn't expecting this 3 months out after FTO, to happen to me, because I'm pretty tough. I'm a pretty solid guy, and it's that mentality. It won't happen to me. That night at 3:06 a.m. that morning changed, I think, the trajectory of my career and my life. One, because I allowed it to. I didn't know any different. We went right back to work that next week, because we were told to. It's just what we did. And again, I didn't want to show weakness. I was 24 years old. I've been out of the Marine Corps a year, and I wasn't even about to show weakness. And then things just kept happening. 2005, another pursuit, another officer had a recruit die during custody and defensive tactics. I was his instructor in 2012. And again, I spoke of the tornadoes, that we have come through here. And that doesn't even mention, like the regular calls, the baby calls, the car crashes, just the regular calls that we go on daily as first responders. And it just becomes work. You think you had a bad call, and then you get a worse call, and that call just gets pushed down, and it just keeps kind of piling up until eventually everything explodes out of your bucket, your backpack, your wheelbarrow, whatever you carry. And when my bucket got full, I just got a bigger bucket. But eventually, like I said, it just consumed me. I'd gone through 2 marriages at the time. Again, as my kids got older, they realized that I was not okay. They actually seemed weird to them at the time, because other parents weren't acting like I was acting. But until I got to a place, and I got in trouble at work. I actually got put on administrative leave from an on-duty call. I was on AL for about 13 months. And then I was actually arrested by my own department for that call for assault and battery, and actually went to and booked into our jail in Oklahoma County. And then I was actually, after I got out of jail, I was terminated. I was actually fired for 1 year, a little over a year, actually. So when things catch you, they catch you bad. I was making some really bad choices out there, and it caught up to me. After I got arrested, I was mad. Boy, was I mad. I was mad at everybody but the one person I probably should have been mad at, which was me. I was very bitter at my department. I couldn't believe they had treated me this way. But after getting some training and education and understanding the dynamics of it, it was absolutely me and not them. They had a job to do, which was to protect the city from people like me. I did come back to work in 2010. And successfully. I still had bad calls and still had things catching up to me. But like I said, when I got so tired of being tired, and I finally found a culturally competent counselor that, like I said, he saved my life, I started kind of understanding peer support a little bit, but my ego was still so big that if you didn't wear a gray shirt and a gold badge like we wear, and you weren't there, I was not going to talk to you. It was still my ego in the way. Which oftentimes that is what was holding me back, was my own ego. But once I started to understand what was going on up here, it made a little more sense to me of why I was acting that way, which is not an excuse, but I started to understand the science behind how and the why. And then I stuck with counseling. I wasn't perfect, nor will I ever be, but I can strive to do better every day. I still go to trainings. Um, I obviously still do a lot of peer support, not only here in Oklahoma, but around the country. I like helping people. I like talking to the kids. I like talking to the spouses and the first responders because it's one entity. And oftentimes when we talk to spouses or partners, well, he or she's got the tough job, and I'm like, no, you have the tough job being at home, and I understand that now. So when we change our mindset and understand that this is one entity, and we truly do family first, that makes a big difference. But the training, education, still going to counseling, and understanding when there is conflict, you have to have conflict resolution at home. You can't just talk about it and we'll go to bed and visit it tomorrow, because you don't know what tomorrow looks like. You don't know if there is going to be a tomorrow, and we know that from what we've done for a living for so long. We see it daily. But communication, connection. I always thought if I was a good cop, I'd be a good husband and good father, and I had it backwards for about 15 years. And once I kind of started to switch that mentality and understanding that I need to be good at home, I need to be a better partner at home, and sharing age appropriate, sharing things that are appropriate about how my day was or how I was feeling. Because again, I didn't want to show that weakness. But once I let the armor down, we come home, we take off our vest, we take off our gun belt and our boots and our uniform, we put on our civvies, but that armor's always up. The armor's up at restaurants. The armor's up at church. The armor's up at family events, at baseball games, at wrestling matches. The armor never comes down. And until you understand the dynamics behind it and why the armor stays up, it's a lot easier to let it down a little bit and start to understand yourself and how to be a good human, and then be a good first responder.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I appreciate you sharing that, because I know, I've heard you speak before, and, so everything you're sharing is stuff that you have shared before, right? And you've gone through, hey, look, my career started off like terrible, but then it doesn't stop there, right? It continues. Like there's always going to be another call that has the potential to be worse than the call before. Then that doesn't even include, the other stuff you went through with, just being out of work, and then, fired from your own agency, then brought back. But I think something to really hit on there is that you did come back, and not only did you come back, but, you progressed forward after that. Not to say it was easy, right? Not to say it didn't take work, because I'm sure it did.
People call me all the time and say, number one, why'd you go back there? That's pretty crappy of how they treated you. And then how did you go back? Because oftentimes when this does happen, you go back to the same agency, whether it be for, and then you leave on your own terms or whatever it is. But it was a choice. I felt like I had disgraced my dad, who wore the gray shirt. I felt like I had disgraced all of my fallen partners that wore the gray shirt. And I made a choice when I came back to work that I was going to be better. I didn't even know how or what it looked like. But I told myself I was going to be better. Now, did I get better overnight? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Because like you just said, calls keep coming. Bad things keep happening. But at least I started to learn what the emotion was, how it's tied to what event, what triggers are, who to call afterwards when I'm out of work mode, and not just letting it keep pile on and keep pretending like everything is okay. I know we talk to people all over the place, and how are you? I'm fine. You sleeping? Nope. You look like you put on some weight. Yeah, I'm eating all the time. I mean, they even say it out loud, the negativity that they're bringing upon themselves, and don't realize how negative it actually is, and how tough it is on your body to start treating your body that way, and emotionally. But they'll tell you they're fine, but you can physically see they're in distress.
Yep. Yep. And as we move forward, I kind of want to, transition a little bit, out of, talk about some of the, obviously there's the bad, right? And you have to talk about the stuff that, you've gone through in order to flush that stuff out, but in order to encourage other people to do the same thing. But as you look back at, your career, what's one of the funniest or most awkward calls for service that you can remember?
Whew.
You're like, let me go through the list.
Yeah, I was in motors for about 8 years, so it was nothing but traffic stops. And the way people act on traffic stops sometimes they get so angry when it's just a ticket. And it could be a warning depending on what's next out of your mouth. But I had some pretty funny ones. And I'm talking like people passing me on the interstate and then asking where I came from. I'm like, you just passed me. But I had some funny interactions on some traffic stops for sure. I stopped a clown once, a full clown. I've stopped Santa Claus multiple times, multiple times. I actually stopped some naked people, which was during the day, which was a little awkward. But yeah, the clowns and Santa and the dressed up people was usually that was usually pretty funny. And I'd have to, of course, everything's on camera, so you get to go back
Yeah.
and visit later when you tag it to to go into the system. So yeah, motors was probably some of the funniest interactions I had for sure because I had nothing but interactions all day. So doing traffic.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think it's good to remember those because those kind of offset the others, right? When you kind of remember like, oh, hey, that was a pretty funny call, or um, you know, trying to remember some of the good from the the job, right, in the career, because a lot of times we just have this tendency to focus in on the negative, and that just continues just to kind of keep you in that slump, right, continue to beat you down. And but when you find that satisfaction in your job, or you find that kind of that little bit of light there, that break in the regular routine that gives you a little bit of encouragement, to kind of gives you that purpose to continue pushing forward and do what you've set out to do, right? I mean, you answered the call for service to serve other people, and sometimes throughout the career that kind of gets lost, right? That call, that purpose gets a little bit blurred because you've dealt with too many people that are just jacks, and you just there's you've dealt with some of the worst of society, and it tends to drown out some of the best of society that you interact with. So you're trying to keep that balance and trying to keep that tuned in to where it's still giving you that encouragement to move forward, and just to continue to say, okay, you know what, I am I am here. I'm fulfilling my call, I'm fulfilling my role because I see the good outcomes here, and
Yeah,
I
we,
see
we
what
do. We
good here.
forget it because everything is so negative. Everything
Yeah,
we see is so negative, and we forget about the homeless guy we fed. We forget about the kid we held because your partner's holding their parent after a terrible fatality accident. We forget about the stuffed animals that we give out. We forget about the stickers because all the negativity is all we talk about. We don't talk about
yeah,
the stickers. We don't talk about the kids. Is it because it's not cool? I don't know, but we focus on that negative part, and it can even be the agency betrayal, the hat policy,
yeah,
whatever. That's the things that get focused on. We don't get normally kudos for giving homeless people food, but we
yeah.
get in trouble when we make a mistake when it involves an SOP or a directive. You know, um, but we oftentimes forget about all the positive things we really truly do out here, and the why. Like you said, what was the why? When I'm talking to recruit classes, I want them to say it out loud. I want to hear the why. And then when I talk to retired groups, I'm like, anybody remember their why? I might get two or three people. And I get that the why changes. I understand that. But you get back to the why from when you started, it often will lead you in the path that you want to be on because you took it for the right reason.
Yep. Yeah. No, and I appreciate you talking about that, but also the fact that when you do talk to recruits, that you're plugging that in, and also even those who are, as some would say, the old crusties, right? The old salty dogs that kind of, hey, remember why you got into this in the first place. But as we kind of move forward, when you look back at your career, what are three of the most significant things that you learned that you want to pass on to the next generation, or those still in the profession?
Work life balance. That's a that's a big one. Work life balance. Um, If you don't have that, and it gets off kilter because of extra duties, call outs, extra jobs, whatever it is, the only people that are suffering there are the people at home, because you don't see it, you don't feel it until there's a big blow up, you know?
Yeah.
So the balance, and it's got to be you and your spouse or partner. It can't be, hey, I'm going to work midnight shift. You go do this. This is how we're going to do. And that's what happened at my house. And it's just not a good way. The other piece is communication and connection. You've got to find something to do outside of work. And I'm not talking about going to the range or reloading, anything like that, whether it be spiritually, little league, whatever it is. You've got to find something to keep that communication and connection open to your family, because that hypervigilance thing is a real deal. And if you don't understand it, that work-life balance, the connection and the communication will all be off at home.
Yeah.
I tell people, work good, home bad. And when you stop and think about it, as dumb as that sounds, that's how we often think of things, because we go to work, we're like-minded, we think alike, we're going to go and talk to people and go do our job, and we're going to laugh and have a great time all night long. And then we go home and we're going to be disconnected and shut off, because they truly get the leftovers. They truly, truly get the leftovers. And nobody likes leftovers after a couple of days. Nobody's going to eat that. It's going to get thrown out. And there's a reason for that, because it's spoiled. And It's the same with us when we come home and all they get's the leftovers. So work-life balance, communication and connection are some things that I've learned over the years, because I've been on both sides of it now, are a big deal in mitigating through this career, this life that we have.
Yeah, and I think that's important, for anybody, not just those coming into the career, but also those still in the career. Like, because a lot of people don't learn that balance, right? They don't learn that balance. They don't learn to stay connected, to stay, to really invest in that healthy communication. Because over time that's gonna break down. And I love the fact that you kind of brought the two together. Like, hey, like nobody likes leftovers, right? Nobody wants to go and open up that container in the fridge and be like, oh, right. And that's the same thing, that we see oftentimes, is that's what you take home, right? You take home that container that's filled with nasty, spoiled, stinky stuff, right? So when you get there, that's what you bring home, and that top gets cracked open, and that's what gets pushed out to your family and your friends, is that rank, nasty, spoiled, what's left of you. And that's not fair, right? That's not fair to your family. That's not fair to your friends. And it's especially not fair to your dog. And, especially because I've got a friend that says, hey, you really want to know how somebody really treats people? Look at the way they treat their dog. Right. And I never really thought about that until I was like, man, there's probably a lot of truth in that. But nobody wants, the leftovers. Nobody wants that stuff that's spoiled. When you go home, you should be giving, your family, your kids, like you should be giving them that top quality, part of you. You should be going and investing with them the same that you would the job, because they're the most important aspect you have, right? Your social support network, those who are there after the job is gone, or hopefully are still there after the job is gone, right? They're the ones that you need to be investing in and nurturing and investing in those relationships, because they're the ones that when all of it's gone, right? When you're no longer wearing a uniform, when you're no longer called, sergeant or lieutenant or whatever it may be, they're the ones that are still there, right?
Hopefully.
Hopefully, right? You retire and you retire as a captain, and you leave, and guess what? They're promoting a captain the next day.
Oh, easily, yes.
But so you go home, and your family doesn't care if Captain Blue's coming home, but they want dad, they want husband, right? That's what they want. So that's just a great reminder. Like, hey, let's make sure that you're giving, that best part of you. And doesn't mean that you're going to give work the spoils, right? That's not what we're talking about, but finding that balance, right? Knowing like, hey, I'm going to balance it out. I'm going to divide it up to where I'm doing right by my family.
Well,
And
and
I
a
think
lot of
that's
that too is
that's
including
important, man.
your spouse or partner in some of those decisions. You know,
Absolutely.
hey, there's a detail coming up, whatever it is. Are you cool? Thunder game for us. Hey, there's going to be thunder coming up next month. Are you cool? Well, no, we've got this and this and this. Yep, you're right. Because I don't need to go work thunder every night or whatever it
Yeah.
is. And I often talk about, who's going to wipe your ass at the end of the day after you're retired. It's not going to be your department. It's not. There, as soon as you
No.
retire, your entry card is turned off. You're not coming back into the building without an escort. Um, Hopefully, the family that we've been talking about will still be there for you when you are sick and old, and you're not a captain, you're not a deputy chief or sergeant or officer anymore. And now is it the time at 50 years old to be dad? Nope. My kids are 31, 25, and 21. There's nobody to play catch with anymore. There's nobody to go to games to anymore. And I look back and think about all the times the boys were, hey, look, Dad, let's go play catch. I'm exhausted, son. I got to get a nap before I can head in for midnight shift. Or, I tell them I would be physically at everything, but emotionally, I was completely checked out. In fact, I was going through some pictures the other night. Yeah. I went back and looked at some of their graduations, some of their games, some of their events, and I'm in uniform, almost every one of them. Went back and looked at pictures of me and my dad. Same thing. He's in uniform. And you can't get those times back. You can't sit up in the stands later on and watch your son walk across for graduation. Because I had convinced myself and my wife that I should be down there to take pictures because I'm going to work it. And you don't get that time back. And it's hard to talk to younger guys about it, but when I'm talking to the old cats, they're like, yeah, I get it. I understand that.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing is trying to now relay that to those coming in, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's still important to talk about it, with those who are 15, 20 plus years in, right? Because some of them still may have, that time left where they can kind of pump the brakes a little bit and then kind of, self-correct that. But trying to instill that in those that are just coming in, like, hey, look, learn this now. I think is a great key point. And kind of on that. So when we look at like the onboarding of our recruits, do you think that we're doing um, everything we can to really give them the resources and the information they need as coming into the profession and saying, okay, hey, this is what you're coming into. This is what it looks like, and providing those resources to them.
I think most agencies are doing the best they can with the resources they have available right now, whether it comes down to
Yeah.
money, manpower, instructors, whatever it looks like for them. Very rarely will I run into an agency or an administrator that is purposely, not doing the best that they can. But again, everyone has a boss. Um, would it be great for everybody to be at full manpower? Absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't know many agencies in the country that are even close to it. And I don't think it's because we can't find people that want to do this job anymore. And I know people say that. I think a lot of it comes down to some of the politics that we have no control over at all. And I think these agencies are doing the best that they can. But I also think on that side too, is that's where your peer support, your wellness teams come into play to be able to go in and talk to these agencies or to these young recruits at the academy level or the cadet level and spread these resources and give these personal stories to say, hey, don't do this because this is what's going to happen, and share some of those pieces. I know in Oklahoma City we do a really good job on our wellness team. In 6 months of the academy, the wellness team is teaching once a month, and doing a spouse academy or family academy once a month, which is awesome. I know other agencies around the U.S. that are doing the same thing, but I do think they're doing the best that they can with the resources that they have to get the word out, to get resources. And that's where people like us, other foundations and nonprofits around the country that we work with are available. And I hope that these administrators will use them and reach out, and say, hey, can you come help us? Please come in and talk about this for us. Because not everybody needs a wellness team. Not everybody
Yeah.
needs 200 peers, but if they have the resources and they know who to call, that's the first step. And then getting that word out to these young cadets, to these young recruits at the academy level and their families. Trying to send a cop home with a message to your family, it's like sending a kindergartner. If you don't pin it on the back, and then
it's not going to get there.
No, it's not going to get there. No. But I do think everybody's doing, with the resources they have, I think that everybody is doing the best that they possibly can. Because nobody wants to fail your community. Nobody wants to fail your state or your county. So I do think that everybody is probably doing the best that they possibly can with what they have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for the most part, that is, that's pretty true. I think it's pretty accurate. I think, there's some agencies like you talked about that are doing, way better than others. And there's some that are trying to say, hey, this is what we have. This is what we're doing. But I think just in general, though, there's a lot of other things going on. There's a lot of other resources outside of your agency that are really trying to, just dial in and say, hey, look, make sure that, once you step into the career that you're taking care of yourself, you're taking care of your family, you're making sure these things that, are usually, just key issues that come up that you're watching, you're trying to take care of. And it's coming from people who have that experience of like, this is lived experience that we're trying to pass on to you, saying, don't do what we did. But unfortunately, we know how that goes. It's like teaching your kid or your toddler, hey, don't put your finger in the outlet, don't touch the hot stove. And they look at you and they're like, right. They do exactly what you don't want them to do. But, and you're like, okay, I told you. Now, what are we going to do moving forward? So
yeah, and you bring up a really good point right there, and that's why I think some peer support around the country and these wellness teams are so important for the administrators to know who to call, because you could tell one of your troops something, and they'd be like, "Yeah, Vern doesn't know what he's talking about. Sorry, he has no clue what he's talking about." But I could call them, say the exact same thing, and they'd be like, "Oh, I get it now." So it is. It's like dealing with somebody on that emotional level because of maybe where they're at in their trauma or their process. And I think that that's why it's so important for these administrators to know that they can get outside their agencies. Because as you know, most officers, most first responders don't want to talk to anybody inside their agency. They would rather talk to somebody from somewhere else. Because I often, in fact, I very rarely ever meet most of the people I talk to. Very rarely. Occasionally I will if I go to their town, and I'll text them and be like, hey, I'm in town for whatever. But most of the time, as a lot of first responders would rather know to call someone outside of the agency and get some information. And then that way, if it does lead into counseling and you find a culturally competent counselor somewhere in their area, they know the agency doesn't know. And they're good with that. And oftentimes they will go do that.
Yeah. And I want to take some time here to kind of dive into what you're doing now. Because I think it plays into just everything we've really talked about. Yeah. So, obviously, you're on the other side of your career, but you're still actively investing into others that are still in the career, still jumping, just coming in. So why don't you just go ahead and tell us what you're doing now, kind of what you've got going on, and, what that looks like.
I appreciate it. So I've started a little business, Blue Phoenix Support. It's an LLC here that I started in Oklahoma City. The Phoenix I chose because it rose from the ashes. And I feel like as first responders and some of the things that we go through in our trauma and some of our events, we literally rise over and over again. And that's why I chose the Phoenix to be a part of the title. Some of the things that we're going to be doing is peer support, taking phone calls from administrators, setting up wellness teams, doing debriefs or defusings if agencies need that, and then doing also the critical incident stress management classes to help build peers, to make peers. That's a national standard through ICISF. So a lot of good things, but the big thing is being able to talk to the administrators. They know who to call when something happens. Working with some smaller agencies that do not have any peer support at all. But again, it's just that connection with their staff to say, hey, let's call Blue. Maybe, let's at least get the ball rolling here and get some resources our way. Because oftentimes too, we will know people in your area that also have wellness teams, that have peer teams that can respond obviously much quicker than someone on the other side of the country, but at least get that resource in place and at least get them there to get that team grounded until we can get some other people there to help. But yeah, it's really just going to be doing peer support, helping out, making connections, and just keep this mission moving forward. Getting out and doing presentations, talking to talking to recruit and cadet classes all the way up to retiree, and still get out and hit some of these conferences. And again, just keep the word moving forward on this mission to get everybody healthy. I hope that my company and other foundations and peer support and wellness isn't a thing. I hope that none of these conversations even have to take place in 20 years. I hope they don't even know what it was. And now, is that real life? No, it's not. But maybe it can get better. And I actually heard somebody say the other day, we say we change the culture and we need to start changing the tradition, which really hit home with me. I was like, wow, that changing that tradition and the culture, I think together simultaneously will start to navigate these young cats into the right direction to where maybe they don't wait 15 years. Maybe they don't wait until they're in their 50s to try to get help, and then they're playing catch up literally the rest of their life with their trauma. So I'm hoping this word gets out. If you don't know who to call me. I will definitely get you hooked up with the right resources in your area. Because like I said, we're just here to help people and get them on the right track.
Absolutely. So how can somebody find you? You're on social media.
I am. Yep.
You guys have a website?
Social media. My the website's still being built as we speak. Actually, the email is BLU Phoenix 1271 at gmail.com is the email. And then I'm going to give you my personal cell phone number, which is 405-521-7903. Please don't hesitate to call me. I will find you resources. I'll sit and talk to you, or if I need to travel and come do presentations for you or help your leadership work through some things. I am all on board with that, and just getting the word out. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to be healthy. Your identity doesn't have to be the crazy old guy, that's out on the streets doing whatever. You can go out and actually help your community and remember your why.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll add that in the show notes, so they can they can go and find your social media page and all of that. So, but as we kind of start to wrap up, and I appreciate your time. I appreciate you coming on and just sharing just with your background and your history and kind of what you're doing now. But as you look back over your career, how much has your faith played a part in kind of where you're at now?
So I think I'm Jewish. Both my parents were Jewish all the way back to whenever. It's funny. I grew up in a temple here in Oklahoma City, at Temple B'nai here in Oklahoma City, and then unfortunately I got away when I got in the Marine Corps, and then onto the police department. Working 8 days on, 6 days off, not prioritizing would be a better way to say it. My faith. I pray every day. Once in the morning, once in the evening. I often stop during the day, because if I text you and say I'm praying for you, I literally am going to stop what I'm doing and say a prayer for you. But as far as, everybody, it's weird sometimes after trauma, they either push it away or they immediately want it. Normally. Sometimes it takes them a little while to say, hey, I really need something spiritual right now, which fortunately we're really good at finding that chaplain or that rabbi. So how much has it played? It was there. I'll tell you this. It was there when I needed it, which I knew that it would be. But again, sometimes, we prioritize things in the wrong order, and we often forget about how we were raised, whatever religion it is. And we forget sometimes what that piece looked like and what it's done for us and what it did for us until we need it, but we know that it'll be there when it's necessary.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. And I appreciate, you just taking the time to jump on and share that and just share your thoughts and just your passion for moving forward and what that looks like and kind of next steps for you.
I appreciate you very much reaching out. Yeah, this was awesome, man. Good timing. And I really do appreciate you. And I hope this message gets spread. And I hope that if just one person watches this, just one person, and they reach out, then what we did today was definitely worth the time that we did it in.
Yep. And I mean, we're just getting ready to wrap up, and I just had a camera issue, so it's all right. My angle changed, but we're still here, and but I appreciate it. So I'll add all that in the notes. And Blue, it's good talking to you.
I appreciate you tuning in and listening to Critical Aspects of Law Enforcement. Remember to subscribe to the podcast and share this resource with your fellow officers. The goal of Critical Aspects is to serve, support, and sustain the law enforcement professionals. So head over to www.criticalaspects.org for more resources and information. And as always, God bless and be safe.